Hello, everyone. My name is Ilva Tare. I'm a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Europe Center here in Washington, D.C., and this is Balkans Debrief. Today, we will discuss Montenegro, a NATO member and an EU aspirant country that has been negotiating for the last decade. Two governments have fallen in less than 2 years and reforms have stalled. Why is Montenegro experiencing political unrest after the war in Ukraine? Are there any worries about security? Who is behind the recent cyber attack on government's institutions? Zeljko Pantelic, who is an expert on foreign policy of Montenegro, is here with me today to discuss about these topics and more.
Thank you for having me.
Djukanovic Abazovic government lost confidence vote recently. What's next in Montenegrin politics? Can a majority emerge without election, or is another vote inescapable?
Well, we have a very fluid situation in Montenegro. We are now practically in interregnum, and Antonio Gramsci's definition of the crisis is perfectly correct for Montenegro, that old is dying and the new has difficulty to be born. I mean, the regime of President Djukanovic is trying to survive and use the Russian aggression in Ukraine and ambivalent position of Serbia to accredit once again himself as a guardian of the European and Western value in Montenegro. But it's not enough, declared to be pro-European or anti-Russian. You should demonstrate it with concrete facts that you are really European. Because if you created, for example, a captured state, if you undermine the rule of law, stimulate corruption at a large scale as we have in Montenegro, if you have ties with organized crime, if you transform police and secret service in your personal tools and instruments to use against opposition, journalists, civic activists, intellectuals, if you put under control judges and prosecutors, if you do all these things, you are not pro-European. Actually, you are pro-Russian. And unfortunately, in the past, the West and USA and EU very often have followed the politics which we can describe as the politics of our bastards. Most of our public probably will remember the story of the President Roosevelt and the Under-Secretary of State Wells when they speaking about President of Nicaragua, Somoza. Wells assert Somoza is a bastard. And Roosevelt answered, yes, but he's our bastard. Well, several leaders in the Balkans and in Europe as well, not just in Balkans, have been treated with the kid gloves just because they were and they are our bastards.
So is this a critic that you're doing to the European Union and the Western powers in general for not addressing the issues in the right way?
I just noticed that they should stop with the politics that is enough to be anti-Russian on the words. My point is that you should demonstrate it with acts, with how do you rule your country that you are pro-European. And if we look in the government and what did Djukanovic in the 30 years, it's not pro-European orientation. It's quite opposite.
What did Abazovic do wrong, though?
Well, Abazovic, I think if we look, for example, how we came in this situation, I think that both sides, the Prime Minister Abazovic and President Djukanovic, played a doubled game. Abazovic wanted to use support of DPS, the party of Djukanovic, to accelerate Montenegrin EU integration process and to fight corruption and organized crime, and to choose judges, and we should having in mind these things very much, and the prosecutors in the parliament, because there we need a qualified majority of 2/3 on the 3/5. So you need also the parliamentarians of opposition parties. So Djukanovic, on the other hand, had a plan to use external support to Abazovic government in order to show to the public that DPS is still strong and capable to direct political process. For DPS was very important to show after a series of the defeat on local elections, and I will remind you they lose all elections from 2020 to now, and they wanted to sell and send one strong message to electoral body that they are still strong, and that losing general and the local elections is not inexorable decline of the party that rules for 3 decades Montenegro, but only temporary accident. Then we had one coincidence, and that is very important in this story. Because on the one side, Djukanovic realized that Abazovic will go through and through in fighting corruption and organized crime. And on the other hand, Abazovic was obliged to fulfill giving promises to SNP, a socialist people party, that the agreement with Serbian Orthodox Church would be signed. So Abazovic gave a pretext to Djukanovic to bring down government when signing the agreement with the Serbian Orthodox Church. The leader of DPS used classical, strong man arguments accusing Abazovic for missing the chance to accelerate Montenegro EU integration because the government has signed agreement with the biggest church in the country.
Who does not recognize the independence of Montenegro also, but you are still saying that that was an alibi to attack Abazovic.
Yes, that was alibi, because it's not true that Serbian church does not recognize Montenegro. The Serbian Orthodox Church recognize very much Montenegro. They were practically very, not aligned during the referendum in 2006. They did not take position on independence, not pro, not against independence. So this story is a little bit much more, difficult to explain. So just I want to the point that the fact is that DPS, the party of Djukanovic, slowed down EU integration process with overthrowing the government, because it's very indicative that DPS controlled media, and media activities on social media try to sell the narrative that for Abazovic is more important agreement with Serbian Orthodox Church than EU integration. And the truth is quite opposite. DPS put at risk EU integration in order to fuel electorals on the eve of the elections, locally in Podgorica especially, because electoral elections in Podgorica is very, very important. Maybe the most important elections from 2020 in Montenegro.
So what are the scenarios now for the new government, new general elections? What do you think? What's going to happen?
Well, I believe that, coming to elections, actually nobody wants really to go on general elections. The reaction the reason is very simple. The parliamentarian parties can't improve their results on eventually new elections. Consequently, they cannot increase the number of the MEPs, and they can just lose seats in parliaments. Because new movement, European now, Evropa Sad in our South Slavic language, founded by ex-ministers of Krivokapic's government, Milojko Spajic and Jakov Milatovic, take the vote from all the parties, even of those which gave in the past their confidence to the DPS, the party of Djukanovic, and they will have probably more than 10% of the votes on the next elections, which will influence strongly political geography in Montenegro. So in my view, everything depends on the results of the local elections in Podgorica, which is foreseen for 23 October, because the capital city is the last big city, big town, important town, where the party of President Djukanovic is still on the power. And if DPS lose Podgorica, then that would be, in fact, political the end of the story that lasts from 1990s, when Djukanovic came on the power with Mobir Bulatovic and Svetomarovic.
Zeljko, in a recent article, you say that Montenegro missed a great chance to finish its negotiations with the European Union by 2025. Is there still any chance to catch the last train? Is there political will to get back on track?
Yeah, you are right. Montenegro missed the big, very big chance to get really close to the membership in the EU. There were windows of the opportunity for Podgorica to finish the negotiations between 2025 and 2027, and that was huge occasion, really huge occasion. But that chance was ruined, and now there is still, I spoke to my contacts in EU, and they told me that there is still opportunity to accelerate a little bit the process, but the conditio sine qua non is to nominate the judges of the Constitutional Court and members of the High Council of the Judiciary in the Parliament. And if that task would be fulfilled, enter this year, so in the next 4 months, in that case, Montenegro will be back to the track, not fast as it could be, but it will be good track. Then there is no, will to fight, and that's the core problem in Montenegro. Corruption and organized crime. When we come, for example, to Djukanovic's party, DPS, and or satellite parties, because they were involved in all these years in a lot of things that have something to do with corruption, with organized crime, because we shouldn't forget that just a few months ago or few weeks ago, the president of Constitutional Court, ex-president of the Constitutional Court, Vesna Medenica, and her son has been arrested for establishing a criminal organization and abuse of office. And she was expression of political will of President Djukanovic and his party. Same thing is valid for president of the Commercial Court, Blažo Jovanic. He is arrested for corruption, organized criminal organization, and abusing his official position. Also, we should know that the very high officials in the National Security Agency has been arrested thanks to the work of Europol and the new Montenegrin special prosecutor Novovic. All these arrested judges and police and security officials had and have very close ties with the regime that ruled Montenegro until 2020. This is the proof that Djukanovic spoke as pro-European and pro-NATO leader, but he rules Montenegro using, shall we say, Russian manners.
Talking about the Russian manners and Russian influence, in your view, does Russia retain destabilizing influence in Montenegro, especially after the attempted coup of 2016?
Well, most of the people don't know, or they forget that in the 2006, the EU wasn't happy about referendum on the independence in Montenegro, while the Russian Federation supporting strongly independence of Podgorica. The biggest investors, we should also bear in mind this, in independent Montenegro were Russian oligarchs, very close to Vladimir Putin. Oleg Deripaska is the best known in the Western world, but he was not the only one who invested his money in Montenegro from 2006 and until 3 or 4 years ago. Some of very close persons to President, for example, Djukanovic, had and maybe still have more closer relations with Moscow and some people in Moscow than any other politicians in Montenegro, including the leaders of the Democratic Front. However, Russian influence in Montenegro is malignant, and that's no questions about it. But it's very limited. We have just a few internet portals and few politicians, as if we look in the most of the NATO country, like Germany, Italy, France, Hungary, Bulgaria, Turkey, it is much more, worrisome that one part of Montenegrin society is genuinely pro-Russian and anti-Western, And they would be like that without any incentive from Moscow. And that's the problem. So the EU and the USA, in my opinion, should not be hypocritical in vis-a-vis communication with Podgorica, because in that way they would give the space to Russian propagandists to spread uncertainty and chaos, which is their main goal, not just in the Balkans, but in the Europe and the United States as well. If we speak, for example, about Russian influence in Montenegro as so dangerous, and we create a list of inadequate politicians for the government, how should we, for example, define Russian influence in Hungary, or in Italy, or in Bulgaria, or in Turkey? And Turkey is a member of the NATO. And can you imagine, for example, that State Department says Orban is not our partner, or Salvini, or Erdogan, because they are publicly, because they are very close to the Moscow, and they have very ties with Moscow? How, for example, will react in Turkey or in Hungary or in Italy? So, of course, Montenegro is not important country as Italy or Turkey, but USA and EU should not treat Montenegro as a puppet state if they want to debilitate Russian influence. Montenegrins are very, spite, as all Balkans people, and headstrong, which often bring them to do everything opposite when somebody put pressure on them.
I want to ask you about the current relationship of Montenegro with Kosovo.
Well, the current relation is good because we have Albanian Dritan Abazovic, which is Albanian politicians, and I think that, for example, Dritan Abazovic is, I think, first pro-Western politicians really on this position in Montenegro, and maybe he is the third in the Balkans after Zoran Đinđić and Zoran Zaev, that is really pro-Western politicians who really try to bring forward his country and go closer to European Union. And he not disguise himself with rhetorics which we heard a lot of time about civic rights and etc., etc. And then behind that we have nationalistic goals or interests, etc., etc. So in that sense, Dritan Abazovic is a very good example, and I think that thanks to him, the relationship between Montenegro and Kosovo will be as it is, at least now. It's not it's not a relation as we have with Serbia. If we spoke about commercial trade, if we speak about the connections, because of course you have it's enough to see, for example, on the Podgorica airport or Tivat airport, how many flights we have for Belgrade to understand how two countries are very close, but connected. But also we have a minority very important in Montenegro, Albanian's minority, and speaking about that, it's a very pity that Djukanovic lose the chance to create really one example of the successful multi-ethnic country in the Balkans, because he, in 2006, he had all ingredients necessary to create one harmony multi-ethnic country. Unfortunately, he lose that chance, and he, choose the way to make stronger his own power than to create one strong state in the Balkans.
Regarding the Open Balkan Initiative, what do you think? What does the public opinion think of it in Montenegro? And is Abazovic's support for it a bad idea?
The majority of citizens of the Montenegro is for the Open Balkan. And also, if we look who are the major commercial, as I said before, partners of Montenegro, where Montenegrins go on the university, for example, or in which hospitals they are medicated, or from which countries come seasonal workers, for example, in Montenegro, we will realize that it's in the best interest of the Montenegro to be part of the Open Balkan. On the other side, we have political parties, that's true, and non-governmental organizations who based their politics and work on the, well, a little bit anti-Serbian rhetoric. And for them, everything what comes from Belgrade or could be seen as interest of Belgrade is a priori bad or something which should be refused. They don't. I think they don't think rationally, but emotionally, or just want, also to deepen divisions in society to assure support for its own side. The affirmation, that Open Balkan is alternative for membership in the EU or for the Berlin process is not correct. Is not true. As a campaign, for example, that Open Balkan is the other name for Great Serbia or Great Albania, just because President Vučić, Prime Minister Rama, supporting very strong this project. Open Balkan is, compatible with EU integration process because it will help the economies of the Western Balkans countries to be more competitive and stronger, and consequently they will be more ready and capable to be part of the EU market when the states come to the EU. Open Balkan is some kind, of the gym, like the gym, in fact, for regional economies.
Exercising before trying to be part of a bigger market. Because
how could you, for example, be ready for the EU if your market and economy can not support competition in the Western Balkans? Second thing, which should be underlined is that Open Balkan is not alternative even for the Berlin process, but complementary. If you look goals of the Berlin process, you will see that two initiatives marching together towards the same goal, the membership in the EU.
Zeljko Pantelic, thank you for giving this interview to Balkans Debrief. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching us. You can follow us on Twitter at AC Europe, or also you can watch our interviews on YouTube and as a podcast.